3, 2, 1. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Download Youth Ministry Podcast, episode 350.
This is it, a landmark show.
Sponsored by the amazing Orange. Join us at the Orange Conference.
I imagine this being in Hawaii, 350.
Orange Conference. I know.
We're not.
If we would have said that at the very beginning. Anyway, join us at the Orange Conference and find out details at where, Josh? TheOrangeConference.com.
TheOrangeConference.com. Doug will be there. Katie will be there. And Josh will be there, too.
Great. Let's do a live podcast.
See you in Hotlanta.
I think that would be great.
That would be fun.
You know, I don't think people like the term Hotlanta.
Let's go to Coldlanta. Wait, do you think people in general?
I think
or
Atlanta
people from Atlanta
are like, don't say that. It's lame.
Well,
it is lame.
You know what my friend Florence Nightingale said? Make sure you give the XP3 discount code.
That's right.
So if you want to get the XP3 curriculum from Orange,
we don't give it out loud.
We don't give it out loud. You have to write for it. You have to send to us at podcast@downloadyouthministry.com. And we have a code that's 15% off the lowest price of anything.
Guaranteed the lowest price. When you listen to our show and use XP3 and use this code that you can only get by writing in.
So if you're thinking about having a world-class student curriculum,
do it.
There you go.
There you go. Do it.
Also, super grateful to Leader Tracks, our friends who provide things for our membership every week.
Texting with Doug Franklin this morning. That guy is a genius. They're always putting out good stuff every month.
Genius?
He's a sharp guy.
Yeah.
He's
and
a
the
sharp
kindest
guy.
human.
Genius. Feels like there needs to be some proof of that.
Yeah, that's true. He's a good dude.
He puts out super cool stuff.
He puts out super cool stuff, and he always wears golf shirts
and cares
every day.
a lot about youth workers.
He's great. I like him, and I think he's super smart.
Every day of the year.
Genius is a
give me an example of a person who's a genius. Go ahead.
Albert Einstein.
Okay, too easy. Give me another one. Give me someone in the...
Sir Isaac Newton.
Florence Nightingale. Didn't she invent vaccines? What was Florence Nightingale's thing?
I think she was like the first nurse.
She was a nurse. Invented the cotton gin?
That's probably not true. I don't know.
The first nurse? I don't know.
I think she was among the first.
Feels... You know what I would say? That was genius.
Among the first.
So, do you know that when I've tried to spell genius, sometimes I get it wrong?
What do you spell?
I don't know.
Genie?
It just always has that little red dot under it, line under it. I'm thinking, how's the irony on that? I'm spelling genius and I can't spell genius.
Yeah, it's like, not you, knucklehead.
Yep,
yeah,
exactly.
Sorry.
No. It's kind of a reinforcement that you are
It's just a humbling tactic by your
Word
computer.
is actually bullying you. Microsoft Word's like, gotcha.
Yeah.
I love it. Yeah. Your parents probably called you a genius when you were young.
Nope.
Some people
never.
Some people probably have called you a youth ministry genius. I mean, you're a titan in your field.
Mogul.
No.
Mostly mogul, not genius.
Mogul, yes.
Yeah.
Mostly mogul.
I love it.
No, I don't. It's just that's a word that Josh uses a lot that I just think needs to be
genius.
Stopped using as much.
Okay, I'll say he's a sharp guy.
Great. I like it.
Doug Franklin's a sharp guy.
Yeah. And kind and wonderful.
And yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The end.
All right.
Hey, enough sponsor talk. Let's get to the show.
We are going to have a one-topic show.
Wow.
A one-topic show, as requested from our executive producer, Allison.
Allison Hibbard. Did we talk about Allison's engagement on the last show?
No, we didn't.
Okay. Are we not going to?
Well, Allison met a young man.
Are we allowed? Should we ask for permission?
At DYM 100.
It was the greatest day of all of our lives.
Yeah, it was at DYM 100.
Oh,
met a young man named Joshua
Where
Price.
magic happens. Yeah.
And
a fully bearded man.
This Josh likes to take credit for it.
I do. I introduced them.
Yeah.
You were like, hey, here's each other.
Here's each other. You're welcome. I would like to say genius.
Did you know? Wait, did you know in that moment? Did you have any kind of inkling?
Honestly, I took a picture of the two of them together, giggling to myself that maybe someday I would show this picture at the wedding of their first conversation. Because I introduced them and he was pretty into her.
That's cute.
Now, somehow he already knew about Allison and was familiar with it.
From the podcast.
From the show. From this
world famous podcast that we do.
So he was into her.
Genius.
Anyhow. And I don't use that word lightly.
Wow.
Anyhow, Allison got engaged, so we're matchmakers. This show, not only have we won an award,
bringing people together.
We bring people together.
Yeah.
That's what we
350 episodes.
Pretty
Josh.
landmark.
It's a lot of our life.
That is a lot. It's a lot of
lot
time.
of life.
A lot of time talking into a microphone about youth ministry.
Can you imagine if
with friends?
This was your legacy? This was your life's work right here.
I'd be proud.
I've had a lot of fun talking to you guys.
I'd be proud. I like you guys.
Same, but don't talk past tense. We're not done yet.
No,
I got at least another 6-7 shows in me.
Well, 350, but you're right, Katie. At the beginning, if we would have said, hey, when we get to 350, let's go to Hawaii.
Why didn't we?
It'd be like us saying, when we get to 700.
Yes.
You're like, oh, that'll never happen.
Yeah. 700 will all be on AARP, and Doug will probably be dead.
No, I'll be dead for sure.
No.
I don't have that many years left.
Well,
Seriously.
I read a study today about Diet Coke.
That's terrible.
Diet Coke takes years off your life.
Does it?
So, come on.
Forward me that study.
Okay.
I drink iced tea, though.
What is this? Just as
flavored with Diet Coke.
It's Diet Pepsi.
Oh, you're fine then. You're fine. Diet Pepsi, no health ramifications.
Diet Coke is Diet Pepsi.
Totally different.
Okay, so let's put a goal.
Diet Coke equals death. Diet Pepsi equals eternity.
Eternal life. Yes, the fountain of youth.
Keep living your life.
So let's just for fun. What are we going to do for the 700th show? Because we'll never get there, but it's fun to dream. What should
I'm going
we
to
do?
get my wheelchair tuned up.
Hey, we'll wheel you to Hawaii.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's go to Hawaii in another 12 years.
Let's talk about volunteers.
This is from
CJ Smith, longtime gold member, DYM 100 alumni from the first year. He says, I recently started at a new church that's only about 10 years old. I'm the first full-time student pastor at the church, and they have not had any volunteers. I came from a church where we built a great volunteer team. What are some tips on being the new guy and still convincing people the importance of serving in the student ministry? So here's what I was thinking. Let's do a show on volunteers. We get probably 1 out of 4 questions is volunteer related. So I'll give you the big picture. We're going to talk about how do you make your needs known for volunteers. Let's talk about how do you ask people to volunteer? Let's talk about how do we train volunteers?
Yeah.
TrainMyVolunteers.com.
Exactly. DYMUniversity.com.
How do we develop?
How convenient. We have things to point people to.
How do we develop leaders that are different than training, but how do we like one-on-one move them in the right direction or enhance their gifts or bring out the best in them? And then how do we challenge, confront,
remove?
Yeah, the tough stuff.
Yeah.
The tough stuff. How about that?
I like it. It sounds great.
And all in about 25 more minutes.
That feels right.
Okay.
I'm on board.
I'm excited.
Okay, where do you want to start? Let's start with making your need known. So here's what I used to say to people. I haven't said this in a long time, but if I could get you 100 volunteers, how many of you would want it? Everybody raise their hand.
Everybody wants 100. Yeah.
Okay, so what would they do? And my statement with that was, until you know what the volunteers would do, you're not ready for them. Because everybody thinks they want volunteers, but until you know what they would do, because people are picky with their time, that if they don't feel their time is valued or honored, they're not going to last.
Yeah.
So, establishing what are the roles that you have for these caring adults that might come into your ministry. I would start there and make a list. What are my roles? And drill down on that list. So not just a small group leader. What's the job description, quote unquote, of a small group leader? If you want them on a weekend service or a Wednesday night, and you want them under more of the quote unquote chaperone, which I don't love that term, but just the kind of the what do you want them to do when they're there?
Yeah.
And the more specific you get, the better it is for that person that you're inviting into that space.
I think sometimes as youth workers, maybe even if you've been doing it for a little while, you just assume that people understand those roles too. And so sometimes you're going to end up drilling things down a little simply or, drilling down even some of the basics. But it'll be worth your time because you might recruit people who are brand new to the youth ministry space. So when you are drilling down some of those roles and those expectations, know that sometimes it's going to be going back to the basics. And I had a volunteer who I told him to go be relational, and he was like, what does that mean to go be relational?
Right. You throw that statement out like it's no big deal.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, right. I'm like, well, okay, why don't you learn 5 names? Ask, pick 2 questions that you're going to ask when you meet students and, just giving a few basic things. So sometimes starting at the beginning feels basic, but it's a good place to start.
Well, you can't ever get tired of going back to the beginning because your job is perpetually taking volunteers with no experience and adults who want to care and do care and connecting them with teenage lives. So you're going to continually be clanging the cymbals of the most basic youth ministry principles over and over again. I would go maybe one step even further back than this starting point, and I would just say you have to believe that volunteers are important in your ministry. Like, I think my first couple of years in youth ministry, I was like, the church has hired me to be the youth pastor. There's 20 kids here, and so I'm going to pastor them like crazy, and I'm going to know every one of them. I'm going to be at all their games. I'm going to go in. And I didn't even think early in youth ministry that volunteers were that important. I kind of felt like I'm the professional here. They don't want me to empower adults. They want me to pastor these kids. And so somewhere in that journey, I started to realize that youth ministry alone is not nearly as effective. It bottlenecks growth and all of that. It limits the perspective of faith because it's one person's story. And everybody has a capacity, and you will quickly reach your capacity limits. And so I think you have to realize that your youth ministry church has to be bigger than you. It has to be more than you. You are not the savior of the world. You're not. It's not a one-man show. In my case, I'm going to build a great team, and that team is going to help build a great youth ministry. So I would just make sure, in the deepest place of your heart, you realize you're not here to be the hero. You're here to build and pour into a bunch of heroes.
That's good.
Thank you.
That was really soapboxy.
What a great show. I would say it was genius, but whatever.
Yeah, I would say it was soapboxy. Okay, so we believe the volunteers are important. That that is the one thing that can scale. So as our ministry begins to grow, you can't keep hiring staff for every X number of kids that you have. That's just not scalable. At some point, if you have to hire somebody, you hire somebody who's great with volunteers, and they actually, become
help you scale further.
Multipliers and developers.
Yeah, absolutely. So volunteers are valuable. Nothing becomes dynamic until it becomes specific. So now we're going to ask, here's specific tasks for a small group leader, a mentor, a coach, whatever roles we have in our ministry. Now we have these roles. We believe volunteers are important. Now we have to find volunteers.
Yeah.
We got to ask.
Yeah. Making the ask is really, really challenging. People really quickly, in my experience, started to see me coming and would lower their head or walk faster or walk around or pretend to be on their phone, whatever they could to avoid the ask because they knew that I was coming for them. Just one quick aside before we dive into this further. There are some great volunteer youth ministry descriptions for roles on Download Youth Ministry that youth pastors have made for their volunteers. So you can show them, hey, here's a specific job. Here's when I say I want you to be a chaperone, here's what that means. Or here's what a prayer warrior looks like or whatever. So just as an aside, there's some good stuff on DYM. To me, I'm sure I've said this before on our shows, but I like the sniper versus the shotgun. I really prefer the one specific ask. I realize it's a gun analogy. Yeah. So apologies.
I thought it was genius. For the NRA people.
Yeah, exactly. Anyhow, I think the big, wide open ask where you're just kind of hoping that someone responds to your message, those days are largely past. And I would say a really honed, specific message, a story to a specific person, an invitation to one is going to be far more effective than kind of just hoping people respond to an advertisement. So.
I think too, just kind of, we've talked about this before, but just shattering what your expectation of an awesome youth worker is. There's just an awesome youth worker inside of all sorts of packages and peoples. So I think just being open yourself as a youth worker to who those people could be. I think too, starting with, if you have maybe a male and a female volunteer and teaching them to ask as well, I think that some of our best asks have come from me saying to my current volunteer team, everything's more fun with a friend. So recruit a friend that you love serving with and that you is going to be great for our ministry. Yeah. And I just think those have been some of our most powerful asks, that when they hide from you, they're not hiding from
they don't see that small group leader coming.
And so I think just utilizing maybe I know you're starting from scratch, the original question, but even, if you get a few to start with, then training everybody to be inviters and askers for the team, I think is huge.
Yeah, well, inviters is a key word too. That's, we talked about the difference between inviting or recruiting. Nobody wants to be recruited. Everybody wants to be invited. So even changing your vernacular of what you actually use. I also think that in the first few years of youth ministry, is it first few or first two?
First two.
First 2 years.
I just wrote a book called First Few Years of Marriage, so that's I just got them backwards there. First 2 years of youth ministry is I have something called Master the Ask. That, you asked just a list of like, you have to ask confidently, you have to ask expectantly, you have to ask prayerfully, all these different ways you have to ask. But the reality is you have to ask. And so when you ask anybody who is in youth ministry right now, they're in youth ministry because somebody either asked them or they felt called. So if somebody feels called, then you still got to ask them anyway. I mean, they're looking for an opportunity, but most people, they either feel called or they were asked. Yeah. And then when I do this in a seminar format, everybody likes to have an exception to that. Well, I got in it through, and then I hear them out and I waste 7 minutes and go, no, you were asked. Yeah. Okay. Maybe you didn't understand. You're not a genius.
And that was just me in the crowd that day. Yeah.
So, you have to master the ask, and you're going to be rejected when you ask. Yeah. And, give them, I think, if somebody's going to reject you, still give them a place where they can be involved. Yeah. So, for example, I say no to being a small group leader, but if you ask me, will I pray for the youth ministry once a week? Okay, I can do that.
Most people don't think they're going to be great at youth ministry either. I don't think that's like, especially maybe parents or people who are a little older. Like I don't think they think I'm going to be awesome at youth ministry. Right. But I think you have the opportunity to see, beyond that for them. And so, just believing in people and inviting them through their, what you see in them, I think is huge.
Well, I'm telling stories of people that don't fit the stereotype.
Right, definitely.
So pointing out, this is Rudy Johnson, who's 70 years old, and she's been a volunteer for 33 years, and kids love her because she's not cool, but she's consistent and she's caring, and that's what you need to be.
Yep. I would say early in youth ministry, if you're building it from scratch, do your best just to get a couple yeses. And maybe that would be going to stereotypical people. Like, I'm going to go to the college ministry, or I'm going to talk to the kids in the college age class, because their chances are they're going to have some time, energy, relatability to students. I think in startup mode, just get some yeses and get some people on your team. I think as your youth ministry picks up momentum, as things get rolling, other people are going to be like, oh, I want to be a part of that ministry. I see God moving. Or, all right, it's good. If our ministry is growing and it's booming, and I want to be a part of that. I think some of the more difficult asks can come as the momentum picks up steam. So get some yeses, build a team. In Michigan, my first couple years in youth ministry, I didn't ask anybody who was over 25 years old, partially because I was 21 and intimidated out of my mind. But I also found some people who would say yes, and they're kind of in that little bit of more of a startup kind of builders and pioneers. And they became, through thick and thin, they were with me the entire time. And I was able to add a lot more diversity in ages and experience and all that as the ministry picked up momentum. But I would say just get some yeses and start somewhere. You're like, I got 2 knuckleheads who said yes. Great. Pour into them. Love them. Totally. Make them great.
Yeah.
And build more as you go. Yeah.
Okay, so we've made the ask. We've now got people on our team. Now that we've got people on our team, we can't let them, be on our team without helping them and guiding them. So let's talk about some training ideas, some opportunities. And we joke about, trainmyvolunteers.com, but we have found this,
so much good content.
Well, we just found that we're meeting a need because we've got, couple hundred host sites around the country. We're still 6 months out, and we've got over 5,000 people signed up, meaning that you provide something for people of quality, they'll go to
it. They're going to commit to giving a morning on a Saturday and showing up at it. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. I would say too often we get the volunteer, and we're like, we got them, and then we just leave them. So I would say, first of all, just know that is a tendency. You've filled the spot, and then you abandon them.
Right.
So keep this value at the forefront. I would say if you can find a training like Train My Volunteers National Training Day, that'd be awesome. Something that you can go to together, even if it's 30 minutes away. You have breakfast, you have laughter, you have inside jokes. You all heard the training together. So there's something really powerful when all 6 of us heard the same thing, or we all had the same epiphany about this structure or calendar issue or whatever, and we're going to go fix that. Or we all developed this passion for evangelism in the same morning. We're like, this is our goal, or whatever. So I would say something together. There's lots of different ways that you can be trained, get training, whatever. And something that also includes some fun memories and team building is a really, really great move.
I think with what we started with, once you have the roles, then what do people need to win in those roles? What do they need to succeed? Yeah. And so I think you utilize the roles that you've created to then kind of determine some of the training that's needed. And there's some general youth ministry training that goes across the board. And yeah, I mean, Download Youth Ministry is full of just great. I mean, there's such a variety. If you wanted to train yourself, if you wanted to use video training, I mean, there's all sorts of things to partake from. But I think in this category specifically, do not reinvent the wheel. Keep your hand on the pulse point of what your leaders need to be trained on. And there's just so much stuff out there to utilize.
It is true. There is kind of like this basic set of youth ministry knowledge, and then there's the specialized for their role.
Right, totally.
I like that way of looking at it. Here's what everybody needs. And here's some stuff just for you.
Well, and we oftentimes, because we're so close to it here at Download Youth Ministry, we assume that everybody knows like what Download Youth Ministry University is.
Totally.
And not everybody does. Josh, why don't you give a little ditty on that?
DYMUniversity.com. It is an online individual learning platform. So basically there's 25 plus videos in some very specific tracks to help you learn and grow as a leader. Youth Ministry 101 is the first class that's offered, and it's got the most basic stuff for volunteers, like literally like what is relational ministry, learning names,
yeah,
like
I mean,
really fundamental
10-minute short videos.
10-minute short videos, a little questionnaire at the end just to help deepen the learning and experience. You can email that to yourself or to a mentor or to your youth pastor if you're a volunteer. Really, really great, accessible training that starts at literally the beginning. And then they kind of progressively get a little more challenging or difficult. Some topics that maybe are a little more specific as well, all the way up through the Youth Ministry 401 class. Again, 6 or 7 videos, but they're awesome too. They also include some tough stuff that we need to learn about, like how to recognize mental illness and where are my first steps to do when I feel like there's an issue. How do I deal with a student who's suicidal or has suicidal thoughts? I mean, so there's some intense stuff in there too. But as we work with teenagers, we've got to be prepared for. An untrained leader is going to crumble and fold and melt down, and you have to be prepared.
And lean into the expertise in those lanes specifically, because I would say that's what I don't have time to do all the research on mental health. So leaning into experts in some of those specialized places is such a good use of your time, instead of you becoming an expert in everything, which you can't.
Well, you can't. Yes, you can be a genius, but not in everything.
Right, not in everything. You can't. And so, yeah, I mean, this area, I think when I first started in youth ministry, there wasn't a whole lot out there. And so you just were forced into creating everything and trying to become an expert on everything. And now there's just this treasure trove of stuff.
You can let Doug Fields, Katie Edwards, myself, and Chap Clark and Kara Powell and some of the, the these are the greatest minds. Mark Ostreicher does some stuff. There's unbelievable wisdom and training. Some of the people on there are geniuses. And let them train your volunteers. And for many youth workers out there, even full-time, part-time, you need this training. Like, take this course, set the bar. Hey, I went through 101, wasn't session 5 grade, and it's priced at a way, it's $250 for the year, as many volunteers as you have, which I think is really, really important. So if you're bringing 3 or 4 into it, it's still super worth it. If you have built a good team, man, you could put 12 or 15 or way more than that into the system. And everyone takes the courses on their pace, on their schedule, super easy. Yeah, it really has been a game changer for a lot of churches.
Well, one of the reasons that it has been is because we kept them short.
Yeah.
And what we've learned
just
as
keep it
youth pastors
super accessible.
is that, if you're trying to say, hey, come do this 2-hour training every month, you're having a difficult time getting people. But, come to our leader meeting, we're going to show a 10-minute training, or here's one we want you to watch. It's only 10 minutes. I need you to commit to 10 minutes between now and the next time we meet in a month or 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever it is. And if somebody can't commit to 10 minutes of training in 2 months or a month, they're probably not going to be the type of volunteer you want, anyway.
There's a few churches that have said you have to take the entire 101 course, which is about an hour's worth of content in total, before you can even be an official volunteer. So you're going to start in our youth ministry, come to youth group, or be a co-leader for a few weeks. But after this, certain window, you have to have taken 101 just to get the basics down.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good move too. Don't just fill, you're bleeding and you need volunteers, you'll take anybody. And I have done this. We've all done this.
Sure.
It's very different to say, instead of just putting a Band-Aid on something, I'm going to find the right person, I'm going to invite them well, and I'm going to train them and prepare them for the stuff they're going to face. So
there's so much stuff you can turn into training too. Like I was just thinking of the podcast network, that even listening to certain podcasts, or anytime you go to a training or you go to a conference or something like that, take all your notes and turn.
Yeah, buy the audio and send it to your whatever. Yeah.
There's just so many things that you can even take that aren't necessarily specific training, but can be utilized in that lane. That's fun. Right. Like the podcast network, the stuff about parents, pop culture, all of those things are great training.
Well,
pieces.
And even some silly stuff too. Like there's a great show on Derry Brinker's show about how to run good games. And he had a couple guests, and I was like, man, if I had an intern who I needed to help be better on stage, I would send him a link.
Yeah.
And but listen to this. It's going to change your life,
Yeah.
So it's not even necessarily just the big, heavy rock. Sometimes it's just better skills to help them be better on stage. Sure. Yeah. It's great. My favorite move, copy and pasting a blog post. And just simple. Hey, read this when you get 2 minutes on the toilet. Like this is a great article. It'll help you think differently about the kids in your small group.
That's genius. Okay, so we have a philosophy of needing leaders. We've got roles for their, for what they're going to do.
Yep.
We know how to ask them. We know how to ask them. We've got some training ideas. Now, when things go sideways, when they're not meeting the expectations, when they're not showing up, when they're doing their own thing, you've given them a curriculum and they're not following it. The tough stuff.
Oh yeah, rogue curriculum's my favorite one.
Rogue?
When a leader just is like, hey, I got this from the church, but I'm going to do this other, we're going to do the Shack study together or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I just found this great book by Rob Bell, and we're going to, okay, rogue curriculum
what do you do
kills
with that?
me. I go directly to that leader. Usually it's, unfortunately, I feel like I didn't go soon enough. Like, they're taking a week off, they're doing their own thing, or they're going to the bowling alley, they're playing at the park, are they even doing the curriculum? Or, they got this curriculum of their own, this book that this gal's really into or whatever. I would go sooner rather than later to avoid it becoming a bigger issue. Before you get parent emails about it. And I just have a direct conversation going, hey, we have a scope and sequence. We have a discipleship plan and path. And we've specifically chosen this curriculum. Maybe we use something like XP3 that has a whole 6-year deal or whatever from Orange. Or maybe we've developed it internally, whatever. And when you're doing your own study, we're off that plan. And their kids are missing some important stuff that we are accountable to. And our senior leadership has approved this plan, and you got to be on the same page. And so, man, I'd appreciate it if you'd be back on the curriculum this week.
Yeah.
So direct, clear, but also the why, and sooner rather than later, so you don't get slapped.
Yeah.
That's a good
Well,
one.
sooner rather than later, and the reason we say that is because most of us would rather put it off.
Oh,
it'll go
yes.
away. It'll disappear.
Oh,
She'll
yeah.
get her
They'll
act
get back on
together.
track.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm an Enneagram 7, I never want to have a confrontational word with anybody ever. So my personality on top of the whatever, just the uncomfortable stickiness, I don't want any part of that. So I have to fight the way I'm wired more than most to go have that conversation.
Yeah.
Those conversations always help me too to revisit where we started. So coming back to...
That's good. I like that.
Usually when a volunteer's gotten off track, there was a part for me in that somewhere of in the beginning, were expectations clear? Did training explain, so.
Yeah. What do I need to fix now in my training?
And maybe there's
That's
nothing,
Yep.
maybe we did everything right and this volunteer went rogue. But I do find myself after those conversations, like, I need to circle back and just make sure the way that I'm communicating on the front end is setting people up to win and setting them up to meet my expectations. So I just think that's part of it too.
Yeah.
Most of the time the volunteer is super wrong and it's not me at all.
It had nothing to do with your leadership abilities.
Doesn't have anything to do with me, but but I do think
I like the principle, Katie, that when something goes sideways, for to hold the mirror up and go, what could I have done different? How could I have prevented this? And it may be
maybe
2 or 3 things to 10 on their part.
Right.
But I think that having the conversation is difficult. Now, here's what I hear a lot. But they're older than me.
Yeah, I'm the youth leader, and they're in their 40s, and I'm 25.
Yeah, and I'm leading this ministry. What do I do then?
Oh, that's really tough.
The first part of my career leading volunteers, I was in my 20s, know, and I remember somebody saying to me early on, maybe it was you.
Okay, I'll tell you if it was.
I just remember somebody really affirming, hey, God has you in this leadership role to lead these people, and they're not, you're not leading people who are 40, you're leading this team, and they're a part of this team. And so be confident in leading this team,
I love it. Yeah, you've been put here. It doesn't have anything to do with your age.
And it doesn't mean that there isn't, maybe a respect that comes along with sitting across from a parent who's 45. I might approach that conversation a little differently than I did with, someone who is my same age at 22. And maybe there were some different postures at the table, but I think the same confidence and the same conversation had to take place between the two.
Yeah.
So
and it's what's required of a leader. When you have the name leader, or the title leader, it's, and so in a situation like that, when somebody asks that question, I'd say, well, let's just go to Scripture. What does Paul say to Timothy? Let no one despise your youth. I'm putting you in this environment to lead. And so this is your time, this is your season. And I think everybody in youth ministry has had to lead people that are older than them.
And there's an assumption that older people super care about that.
Right.
And that's not always the case. There are
there
leaders.
Can be a lot of respect that
totally. There are leaders that were under my leadership that were parents, but were sitting across the table and they weren't seeing me as a 22-year-old necessarily.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we have this assumption that they're older, this is going to be terrible, but not necessarily.
I had let a volunteer go one time at a situation similar to that. Over curriculum escalated pretty significantly. And it was I was younger than the person that I was letting go. He and his wife were being removed as leaders. And that did send a pretty significant message to the rest of the leaders going, oh, Josh isn't here to play. He's not just happy, fun, silly guy.
Yeah.
There's a vision for this ministry. He believes in it, and he will align us to that. Not that I'm saying you want to be that dictator that whips everyone into shape and align. Sure. I'm just saying when you are decisive, when you exercise your leadership, I think people will respond to that. And they'll go, we're taking this thing seriously. We're not just I'm not a cruise director. I'm not an event planner. I want students' lives to be shaped, and we feel this is the best way. And so get on board, or I will help you get off board. If you have to, removing a leader, it's a last resort, a last resort for me.
It's hard.
But I'm willing to go there for the sake of the ministry.
Right.
So
that's good.
If you have interns working under you or younger leaders working under you, this is something that I would put them into as quickly as possible.
Make them do the bad, hard stuff. I like it.
Definitely. I think where I'm at now, a lot of times, an intern or a younger team member might come and say, hey, this parent's really upset. Can you call her back? Or this volunteer is in trouble, And I think the more you can redirect them to begin to conflict manage and to work through these things, to build their confidence in this area, but man, that will really serve them well.
I agree.
I was grateful.
When my daughter was on staff for 7 years at the church, early on in her youth ministry years, I would say, get to volunteers. There's a lot of roles you can play on a team, but as soon as you can get the volunteer role, get it, because you're going to just become so valuable. You're going to learn so much. Yep. You're going to be able to, see yourself reproduced in the life of others. You get to train people who are, to me,
they're just the heartbeat.
It is. It's the role. And if you can work with volunteers, and that's why I say to church, this is where I think churches are crazy when they call and say, hey, we need somebody young and cheap. I go, okay, great.
Pull out your hair.
And you'll need somebody young and cheap in another year as well. And why would you not try to hire a 45-year-old or 55-year-old or some who can work with volunteers those volunteers are going to be there long after that person is gone. So I think this is to learn the skill of leading other people is a big deal. So, and we gave a lot of good good ideas with this.
I hope so.
So, hey, if you have questions, send your questions to podcast@downloadyouthministry.com. Podcast@downloadyouthministry.com. If you have questions about Katie's personal life and her marriage,
which is wonderful.
Yeah, if you want to ask anything about that, send those too, because those would be fun to read.
Ron is a total stud. We should do a show, just a Ron show.
He's got a lot to say.
He's a stud. I love your husband.
And if you want to find out if Josh really is a genius, you can send that too.
I think they know the answer to that. What camera am I looking at, Luke? Which one? I think you already know. You guys, I'm gonna take your camera for a second.
Yeah, not a surprise. All right, you're all wonderful.
Oh, the greatest.
Yay.
Fun show. We'll see you later.
Okay.
Peace out.